Well, we are going to start. So welcome everyone to the CCN Dialogues. This is organized by the Contemplative Consciousness Network, UK, in collaboration with Fundación Casa del Tibet in España and Santa Barbara Institute for the Study of Consciousness in North America. And this is Alfonso Schwartz speaking as presenter in behalf of CCN. So the dialogue will be conducted in English with simultaneous translation into Spanish. So the Spanish people who need the translation has to go to the little icon below in the screen. Put interpreter, then you can click there and choose your language, Spanish. This session will last 90 minutes. So CCN Dialogues aims to create a space for reflection that both promotes growth as a human being and help us to discern with greater wisdom in order to create a nurturing and sustaining society. So the space of CCN Dialogues, we want to debate topics of great social significance and of vital importance for the evolution of today's world. And this will be unfolded by our guests. They will be scholars from the spiritual, scientific, economic, and other disciplines who will speak to us not only from knowledge, but from experience. So we inaugurate these CCN Dialogues with a discussion about the life and the world of the Dalai Lama, a topic that is both contemporary and with a great historical content. On this occasion, we will have two of the most qualified speakers to address this topic, not only because of their erudition, experience, and dedication to the subject we are discussing here, but also because of their personal relationship with and closeness to the current Dalai Lama. So let me introduce the speakers. So we welcome first to Venerable Thubten Wangchen. Good afternoon, here in Spain. So Thubten Wangchen is the president of the House of Tibet in Spain, but he's well known in Tibetan Buddhist spheres internationally because he's also a member of the parliament of the Tibetan government in exile, representing Tibetans throughout Europe. He was born in Tibet at the age of five, and was, he was born in Tibet, I want to say, and at the age of 5, he was forced to leave his country with his father and siblings when China invaded for real in 1959. Sadly, it was not possible with his mother because she was executed by the Chinese military. He survived by begging on the streets of Kathmandu in Nepal. Soon after, when the Dalai Lama received help from the Indian government and took him as a refugee, many Tibetans were able to enter India. And then he was able to enter in a school for Tibetan refugees in Dalhousie, India, where he studied his native Tibetan language, culture, Buddhist history, art, philosophy, as well as English and Hindi. At the age of 16, he entered the monastery of Namgyal, the private monastery of the Dalai Lama, where he spent 11 years studying Buddhist philosophy and doctrine in depth with different teachers. He came to Spain for the first time in 1981, accompanying the Dalai Lama, and a few years later, in 1984, following his instructions and advice, he founded the Tibet House in Spain, in the city of Barcelona. A tireless defender of human rights, Wangchen La always shows us the way forward with his compassionate attitude. So now we welcome Lama Alan Wallace. Good morning in USA. So Lama Alan was born in Pasadena, California. He moved to Dharamsala in India 50 years ago in 1971 to study Buddhism and Tibetan medicine and language, where he met His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who became one of his main teachers and ordained him as a monk. He studied, practiced, and translated the teachings of many of the greatest lamas of that generation. In 1984, he resumed his training in the USA at Amherst College, where he studied physics and philosophy of science. Then he later applied this training to his doctoral research at the Stanford University on the interface between Buddhism and Western science and philosophy. Since 1987, He has been a regular translator and contributor to the Mind and Life Institute's meetings between the Dalai Lama and leading scientists, and has written and translated over 14 books of Buddhism. In addition to his academic work, he is considered one of the world's leading meditation teachers and retreat guides. He's the founder and director of the Santa Barbara Institute for the Study of Consciousness, but I would like to highlight his latest project, what he called his Heart's Desire, the Center for Contemplative Research, where with the support and blessing of the Dalai Lama, a cutting-edge team of scientists and genuine full-time meditation practitioners practice and research with Dr. Alan Wallace and the CCR, which is founded with a far-reaching goal to understand the nature of consciousness, its multiple dimensions, its origins, and what happens in the dying process. So to go through the CCM dialogue now, yes, I want to talk about a paragraph that I have extracted from the official website of the current Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso, which states, Tibetan Buddhists believe that the Dalai Lamas are manifestation of Avalokiteshvara or Chenrezig, the Bodhisattva of compassion. Bodhisattvas are realized beings inspired by the wish to attain complete enlightenment, who have vowed to be reborn in the world to help all living beings. This dialogue will take us from centuries ago, discovering the cultural and spiritual heritage from which the Dalai Lama emerged, to the present day, where we will explore his vision, his message, values, and what impact he has had, not simply in Tibet, but in the rest of the world. So welcome again, you both, Venerable Thubten Wangchen and Lamalan. So now we began. This will be like a dialogue. So also I will initially address the question to one of you. Please feel free to intervene randomly, as you say, Lamalan, sometimes as a jazz musicians doing a jam session. Then to contribute with your experience and enrich the content of the topics we are going to discuss here. So I began with Wangchen La, good afternoon in Spain. I want to address you the question, from what culture and spiritual heritage did the Dalai Lama emerge?
Oh, okay. So first of all, before going to the topic, I want to say many Tashi Delek and regards to Lama Alan Wallace and all the people who are following this this moment online. Okay, I'm from Barcelona, and Alan Wallace from California, I think. Yes, so 2 different continents. So we are having together because of technology. You know, if we use technology in good way, and so wonderful things we can do it. Yes, and so as Alfonso explained just now, that you know, okay, my short biography. I'm not really nothing big scholar, also not wise, not educated monk. So I just being a Tibetan monk, and who tried to study a little bit, yes, the Buddhist philosophy, ritual, ceremony, and the art of yes, and lives in Barcelona. So my life mostly spent for preserve our culture, our identity, and to defense of our human rights and freedom of Tibet. So this is why my work, Tibet House in Barcelona, to preservation and the promotion of our culture, heritage, and the art philosophy, and also the human rights, etc. And then now the question comes, Alfonso, saying that, so if I can say something, His Holiness Dalai Lama, the which culture comes His Holiness. So of course, Tibetan culture is very rich, very rich heritage, not for the Tibetan only. The culture of Tibet is for the whole world. And also spiritual heritage, as you said something, the spiritual comes from Buddhist philosophy. Buddhist culture is our spiritual heritage. Buddhism is not only a religion. Buddhism, we say, is the way of life, as a philosophy in one's life. Yes, how to control your mind, how to behave well, how to speak, gently and truthfully to each and everyone. So therefore, His Holiness Dalai Lama, as in Tibetan, so he is the one of the who really knows our profound culture of Tibet. And then spiritual heritage, of course, Buddhism, there are Theravada, Hinayana Theravada, and also Mahayana, Tantrayana, whatever we call. So His Holiness Dalai Lama is really the main Buddhist philosophy, which contains all the teaching of Buddha. Yes, from the Theravada teaching to the Tantrayana teaching, Mahayana. He is the one now holder of all the knowledge of Buddhism, His Holiness. So this is what we can say, that His Holiness is the symbol alive, like Buddha, alive Buddha in this century, So this I can say enough, and then I want to also listen Lama Alan Wallace, his comment.
So just a couple of thoughts. I was originally listening to a very high-profile teacher of Bön, the indigenous spiritual tradition of Tibet. And he made the claim that I have no way of evaluating, that the Bön tradition has a history that goes back 17,000 years. It may very well be. I don't know. But that was his report, and he's certainly an expert. What we do know is that prior to the time of the great king, Songtsen Gampo, Tibetans, it seems, had no written language, and one was created, literally created a written language with a grammar inspired by Sanskrit, letters somewhat similar to Sanskrit, with an alphabet, grammar, simplified Sanskrit grammar. And that laid the foundation during the time of the subsequent king, Tizon Detsen, to invite the great Shantarakshita, Padmasambhava, and other great scholars, Panditas, Mahasiddhas from Tibet to come to Tibet and immensely enrich the culture that was already there. But when Gyaltsen Wangchen commented that of the spiritual heritage, there's on the one hand, clearly there was a spiritual heritage before the advent of Buddhism in Tibet, clearly, but not a written language. But what we often are unaware of, I think, even in India, let alone in Europe, America, and so on, is that Tibet, this culture, is a repository not only of the teachings of the Buddha himself, his own enlightened discoveries that are made, as recorded in the Pali Canon, the Mahayana Canon, in Vajrayana, but also, and His Holiness emphasizes this very, very strongly, it's not just a religion. I am religious, and Buddhism certainly has many religious aspects to it. But many people are not aware that it has many scientific aspects as well, not using technology or mathematics, but rigorous experiential and rational investigation, especially with the two centerpieces of Buddhist meditation, namely shamatha, which is the technology, first refining your attention, your mindfulness, your concentration, your attention. So it's a very reliable tool for making valid observations, but also training the mind in logic, in the art of debate, of rational thinking. So this goes back primarily to the great Nalanda tradition of India. And here's a simple point I'd like to make. unbeknownst to many Indians, let alone anybody outside of India, going back at least 500 years before the Common Era, and perhaps 1,000 years before the Common Era, there was already a university known as Takshila established in Greater India, but nowadays Pakistan, Afghanistan region. It was a university. It wasn't simply a monastery. It wasn't a temple. It was a university. And then from the beginning of the Common Era, right until about the 13th century, they developed an entire network, a very rich and elaborate network of universities all over India. Some of them Theravada-based, Mahayana-based, Vajrayana-based, Jaina-based, Brahmanic tradition-based, and so forth. These two were not simply monasteries. These were universities. And I think the crown jewel of all of them was the one university that clearly had an international status and flourished for 700 years, from roughly the 5th century of the Common Era up to the 12th. And that was, of course, Nalanda. Nalanda was a university with a 9-story library, 10,000 students from all over the world, from Tibet, from China, from East Asia, from the Near East, from all over India. It drew scholars from all over Asia. There were 10,000 students and 1,000 faculty, a 10-to-1 ratio of students to faculty. And it was a true university where they studied 5 major fields of knowledge and 5 secondary fields of knowledge. But the centerpiece for all of these fields of knowledge, Namdrikpa in Tibetan, Adhyatma Vidya, the inner knowledge, all focused primarily, everything else is derivative, on the nature of the mind, the nature of consciousness, the true causes of genuine well-being, yang dakpe dewa, the true causes, the inner causes of suffering. We can find many, many causes that catalyze suffering, but not for everybody. And some people have immense suffering even when they're in the most pleasant surroundings. What are the true causes of suffering? What are the true causes of genuine happiness? What are the causes of freedom? What is the path to freedom? This was the centerpiece. And it wasn't simply an object of academic inquiry or of debating intellectual analysis, which it was. It was a university, and that's what university students and faculty do. But coupled with the great Pandita tradition, the great scholarly tradition of Nalanda, but not just Nalanda, many other Buddhist and non-Buddhist universities, Vikramashila, where the great Atisha trained and was eventually at a very high position. It was not only the Pandita tradition, with the libraries and the debating and the research which academics have done in universities around the world, but that was coupled with the Mahasiddha tradition of great, great scholars, some of them great scholars like Naropa, like Shantideva, like Chantakirti, like Dhammakirti, and so forth, going all the way back to Nagarjuna. That coupling of the Mahasiddha tradition of great adepts with profound experiential discoveries that they made and were replicated, inspired by the Buddha, but then replicated through very rigorous training. These two, the Pandita tradition and the Mahasiddha tradition, these two were the hallmark of this entire university tradition. And yet if you go onto Google nowadays and say, what was the first university in the world? Do they mention India? No mention at all. The University of Bologna. With all respect for the Bologna, and the Bolognians and the Italians, with all respect, this first university developed in the 11th century. But that was after they already had 1,000 years of universities in India. But while Western universities, from the beginning, from the time of Galileo and earlier than that, they have really been focusing above all outwards, especially from the time of Galileo and the rise of modern science, trying to understand the nature of reality by looking outwards with the language of mathematics, the technology of telescopes, and now we have so many types of technology, systems of measurement, with tremendous progress, as His Holiness has often commented, the progress in the physical sciences by the Western university system, starting in Europe and then America, Australia, South America, and so forth, is fabulous. It's terrific. And yet, the scientific study of the mind in Eurocentric universities didn't even begin until the late 19th century. And unfortunately, it's been hampered, almost like handcuffed, with the ideological constraints of materialism, believing mind is just a function of the brain, and the notion that evidence has to be physical. So frankly, and now it's just a personal opinion, I think we're still in the dark age in terms of the scientific study of the mind, backed by the whole university system that goes back now almost 1,000 years in the Western tradition. And I'm simply expressing a view that His Holiness Dalai Lama expressed on many occasions. When it comes to the physical sciences, Buddhists, Tibetans, Bhutanese, people like me, have a tremendous amount to learn from physics, biology, chemistry. So much progress, so much technological progress. The fact that right now we can, don't you enjoy being clairvoyant and clairaudient? Isn't that nice? And it's so easy. All you have to do is turn on your laptop. Tremendous progress there. But His Holiness has commented in multiple places, including at the University of Pisa, where he was invited and given an honorary master's degree. When it comes to the mind, the West is still in kindergarten. But the Nalanda tradition is in postdoctoral level, at least 1,000 years ahead. So I think this is part of the richness of the cultural heritage, the spiritual heritage, the academic heritage, into which His Holiness is born, and for which, as Thubten Wangchen said, His Holiness is the primary exponent for today's world, because that university system in India was wiped out by the 13th century. It was gone, but not before. It had been saved by the great Indian pundits like Padmasambhava, like Atisha, Shantarakshita, Kamalashila, and so on, the Mahapandits and the Mahasiddhas who came to Tibet, and then the great beings that came from Tibet itself. And that coupling of these two has made Tibet a unique reliquary, a repository, a treasure house, not just of the teachings of the Buddha, but of a 1,000-year-old university system for which the understanding of the mind was primary. So just a little bit comment to add to those again, Wanchana.
Thank you, Lama Alan. Yeah, so all what you mentioned is through your personal knowledge and conviction. During so many years, you remember that 50 years ago, maybe. So we met each other in Dharamsala. Yeah, we both are quite young. Yes, we both are quite young, and then quite smart. Yes. Yeah, and then so what you have learned from great masters like His Holiness and two tutors, as well as Dr. Yishidon Denla. Yes. So really, then from dialectic school, you have been studying there. So that's a good memory, of course. So
very much.
All the results of your dedication of studying in different fields of philosophy and culture and art, medicine, etc. Now now the time for you is to transmit to the others. Yes. Then other thing, really, you said also the Nalanda traditions from India, the university, Nalanda University, and Nalanda tradition still is alive because of Tibetan, yes, great master of Nyingma Sajja Kagyu Giluk. All these four schools, they have really preserved all the tradition of Nalanda. Then even His Holiness is still repeatedly saying that he wants to preserve the Nalanda. He's a student of Nalanda. Yes. So these all the great masters like Nagarjuna and Shantideva, Kamala Shila, all these, as you mentioned, so many great yogis and panchitas and practitioners came from Nalanda. So grateful, yes. So we Tibetan could preserve and this so special tradition till now, even though inside Tibet, a great difficulty after the invasion of China, though outside Tibet, in exile, leader, His Holiness leading, and his vision, profound vision, and so we could establish Sera, Ganden, Drebung, Tashilumbo, and all the great monasteries in India established, and where His Holiness, mentioned to preserve, to continue the learning and the practice together, Shepa the Drupa. That is like not only verbally studying, but also to bring to practice. Right? So this Shetup Ninden. So all the school of 4 Tibetan schools traditions are so great, really. So many great teachers, masters, Khenpos, lamas have come out from different monastery and tradition schools. So we all need to work together. We are so united because of all His Holiness Dalai Lama. Yes,
Indeed.
he makes a union. He is like a honey where there's a nectar, then all the bees are coming. Yes, so whatever we say or not, everything depends. I think now still Tibetan culture and Tibetan Buddhist spiritual heritage is still alive.
Yes.
And why? And what reason? I think is the answer is only His Holiness Dalai Lama. Yes, his engagement, his profound vision, and his dedication for the world. Yes, and so now Tibetan culture, Tibetan Buddhism is still alive. So great. We have to, without His Holiness Dalai Lama, I think other Rinpoches or other Khenpos quite difficult to accept in the world. Yes, and through His Holiness, his image, his message of peace and non-violence, so every whole world open totally for Dalai Lama and for Tibetans. Yes, this is so. Therefore, we should give him big gratitude, and we shouldn't. Yes, forget.
So Wangchen La, I would like to address then towards following your words about the value, the vision of the Dalai Lama for this world, and also you in other conversations that we have done, you talk about the 4 commitments of the Dalai Lama. Could you explain a bit about that, please?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so that's something. Dalai Lama is the soul of Tibetan Buddhism and also soul of Tibetan culture. Yes, so as long as His Holiness is alive, Tibet will remain. Tibetan situation, Tibetan issue will not die, will not disappear. Yes, so this is one thing. Now as Alfonso, you are asking for His Holiness. Okay, whether he's more than 4 commitment. His commitment is really infinite. Yes, but recently, few years ago, His Holiness explained and declared to openly. He says, rest of his life, he want to dedicate his rest of his life in 4 commitment. In the beginning, 3 commitment. Then he added 4th one. Yes. So now we say 4 commitment of His Holiness Dalai Lama. So, and then, okay, which are the 4? In a brief way, which are the 4? So, so first one, is saying that, like a human value. So we all are human, whether we are living in different continents, yes, Latin America, North America, or Africa, or Asia, Europe, or Australia, wherever live, we are human beings. We are brother and sister. He always says, we are brother and sisters, yes? So therefore, His Holiness always mentioned that, yes, we should share the all kind of values, because modern time, modern world, we have a crisis, so many crises, economic crisis, we have a human value crisis, we have a spiritual crisis, a crisis or crisis, yes, in a modern world. Even 21st century, we are living so many technology, yes, progress. We have so many things, yeah, double, triple things, possessions than previous century. But people are less and less content, less and less happy. We are, yes, desiring more and more to possess, to achieve. So this is one thing, we are never happy. We are never happy. We want more and more. So therefore, His Holiness is always saying that whether you are a believer or not, yes, which kind of, yes, races or tradition you follow, but we all are human. We all want happiness. We all look for peace. Nobody wants suffering and problem and disaster. So therefore, this to promote human values, to be a good person, to have a good heart and live in peace. Let others live in peace and try oneself to help as much as you can to the others. Even if you cannot help to someone, don't harm to anyone. This is the message, So His Holiness wants to, in a short, that first commitment is a human value, because we all are human. We have a great potential of human potential to what? To increase, to develop our inner peace, to develop and keep our heart warm, and empathy and compassion and love to others. So this is like a human values, we say, yes? And this is one thing. And then second commitment we can say is, His Holiness is a Buddhist follower, and even he's the spiritual head of almost the Buddhist, yes? He's the number one, we can say. He never says, he's always saying that he's a simple Buddhist monk, but he is more than that. So the wise people, good practitioner, always practice humble, simplicity, yes? Like Mahatma Gandhi says, simple living, high thinking. This is really His Holiness Dalai Lama, as an example, yes? So, yes, he is a Buddhist practitioner. He's a religious, he's a spiritual. So therefore, second commitment is he want to really make all religion, all tradition of different religions, live together in harmony, in respect each other, tolerance, and share the values between different faith, different tradition, different religion. So this is like a harmonious, yes, in between different religion is his second commitment. Therefore, he traveled, visited to cathedral, and also churches, meeting with, of course, in Vatican Pope, yeah, John Paul II, and many times in Vatican, and he's meeting with a Catholic priests quite often, exchanging the values, and he also visited many ashrams and in India, Hindu ashrams and Hindu gurus, yes, and sharing each other. His Holiness also visited, mosque, Islam mosque, and also, sharing and discussing or interfaith conferences, etc. And then also he like Sikh, yes, Sikh people and all kind of religion, Jewish, whatever. So even he go, he meet, he really respect, and even he wears different hats of different religions. Shows that he is very open-minded. Yes, he want to really work for all religion, live together, work together for the world peace. This is what His Holiness is thinking, and he's working on that second commitment. Yes, harmonizing and all the religions for the world peace and the better world. Yes, this is his third or second, and the third comes as he is Tibetan this life. Some Dalai Lama, third Dalai Lama was Mongolian, yes, and not always Tibetan. Maybe you know. So 14 Dalai Lama. So first, second, third, born in Mongolia, and sixth, also born in border of India, yes, Tawang, Arunachal Pradesh. So this is two Dalai Lama born outside Tibet. And so this is one thing. And but this 14th great Dalai Lama, the 14th great Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso, whom we know very well. So he's a Tibetan in this life. So we Tibetan have problem. Still we have a problem. Yes. So His Holiness, he repeatedly said that during his life, he lost our country. So during his life, he will, yes, bring up some result. Yes. So therefore, he's still, 6 million Tibetan inside Tibet. They are waiting for His Holiness. So we Tibetan in exile, he is the only guide for us. Guide, he's our eye. Without Dalai Lama, we Tibetans are like a blind with eyes. Yes, cannot see the future and present. So His Holiness is very important. So he mentioned the third one, as he's a Tibetan, he have a responsibility to do something for Tibetans in and outside. Okay, so he will never abandon us. He will never stop. He stopped politics, but he haven't stopped us. He haven't forgotten us. He haven't left us. So we are under his control, under his blessing, under his protection. Okay. So the third one is that he will continuously take care of Tibetan causes and Tibetan welfare. And then fourth one, very quick, is that Nalanda University, which Lama Alan Wallace said. Yes. So now Indian government and the Indian people has been so kind to Tibetan and His Holiness. We lost our country. We have nowhere to go. Then Indian government officially invited and His Holiness and all Tibetan, they gave us freedom, really come in and stay in India. The Indian government gave us settlements. Indian government gave us permission to establish Tibetan government in exile. Indian government let us, establish Tibetan big monasteries, re-establish. Indian government have given us to establish Tibetan settlements in different part of India. So Indian government and Indian government and Indian people has been so kind still to us. Therefore, His Holiness says that he want to repay to the Indian government and Indian people in which way is that to revive the tradition of Nalanda University, yes, to bring up and to teach and to pass the knowledge of Nalanda, which come to Tibet and preserve centuries and centuries. Now His Holiness Dalai Lama is giving back to the Indian people, yes, the message of peace, non-violence, and the real meaning of Buddhist philosophy to the Indian people as a token, as a gratitude, what they have done to us. So fourth one is that giving, repay kindness of Indian people and Indian government to the Tibetan people and Dalai Lama. So he want to share his knowledge, especially to the Indian people. So these are the four commitments His Holiness want to apply rest of his life.
So, Lamal, and thank you, Wangchen, for this explanation. It's so kind and profound. But Lamal, I want to address to you the question about also the Dalai Lama has this scientific vision about that from very little boy he worked with the mountain and disabled the cars or the sky.
Sure.
Would you explain something about this kind of vision, please?
This, I believe, has really a lot to do with His Holiness's own unique human personality. Everybody has a personality. Some are more artistic, more scientific, philosophical, and so on. But His Holiness has commented, maybe a little bit in jest, that had he not become a Buddhist monk, he might have become an engineer, because he liked very much taking things apart and putting them back together. Sometimes he couldn't put them back together, but he could still take them apart. And so it's part of his temperament. And I know in His Holiness's first visit to the West in Europe in 1973, he was asked, "Why have you come?" Many people would think, "Oh, he's a Buddhist leader. He's coming to proselytize Buddhism, to propagate Buddhism." But of course, that was not the case at all. And he would ask, "Why have you come to the West?" He said, "Well, I've come to learn." In his first visit in 1973, "I've come to the West to learn from the wise people of the West." And during that visit, long time ago, I know that he met two world-class physicists, one at CERN, where they developed the Large Hadron Super Collider, but another one, a world-famous, I believe it's a German physicist, philosopher of science. So he was already seeking out the wisest people of the West, and especially in science. He came back in 1979, and I think he had a couple of visits between then. But in 1979, as far as I know, please correct me if I'm wrong, that was the first trip that he came to the West, specifically because he was invited to teach. Please share your knowledge, your wisdom of Buddhism. And of course, it's a Bodhisattva vow. If somebody asks you to share Dharma, you can't say, "Oh no, I'm too busy." No, you have to, out of compassion, altruism. If they're genuinely interested, then of course. And so he made his first trip to Europe in 1979 at the request of Tibetans and Europeans. And he gave his very first teaching at a Tibetan Buddhist monastery, Thubten. And he taught the 8 verses of training the mind. And I had the enormous privilege, maybe the greatest privilege of my life, was serving as his interpreter for those teachings. And so he gave teachings there, but just one point, and then I'll get back to your point, Alfonso. On another occasion during that visit, 1979, to Europe, and then he went to America, and the outstanding scholar and translator Jeffrey Hopkins was his interpreter for that whole tour, which was much longer than the tour in Europe. But with respect to that second point that Gyan Wangchen commented, His Holiness way back in 79 commented that the time has come now for people who are utterly committed to their own religious traditions to meet with other people similarly committed to their own religious traditions and come to learn from each other. Very few religious leaders say that, but he is. He is a religious leader. And so not that we become 25% Muslim and 75% Buddhist or a little bit Taoist, or a little bit Hindu, not like that. Then it would be just confusion. But rather, if one is a Buddhist, then be a Buddhist. But we can learn from the Christians, and we can learn from the Hindus. We can learn from others in a spirit of great respect and humility, and augment our own understanding and practice by listening to the strength of other traditions. And so within Buddhism, we have something that may very well be unique. By and large, the Abrahamic religions, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, they are religions. I don't think anybody thinks they are philosophies or they are sciences. They are religions. In the West, we basically define the category of religion on the basis of the Abrahamic religions. But Buddhism is not an Abrahamic tradition. It didn't come from the Near East. It comes from India. And so from its very inception in the teachings of the Buddha and the Pali Canon, many of those teachings are completely experiential and rational. Asking questions, putting the questions to the test of experience, and testing for yourself, are they true or not? Following the very common adage at the time of the Buddha, ehi pasi, come and see. That's what scientists say. Galileo made discoveries with his telescope, and then it's come and see for yourself. Make your own telescope. These are scientific, not in the Western sense of the term, and that's something we should rejoice in. But from the very beginning, the Buddha is teaching about the nature of self, the skandhas, many aspects of reality that are not religious, but are philosophical. And that was from the very beginning. And of course, there's devotion, there's faith, there's worship, there are rituals and so forth from the very beginning. So Buddhism from the very beginning has had all three elements. But His Holiness, unlike many other lamas, some of them, I think all of them deeply religious, some of them highly trained in philosophy, but not all. But His Holiness from childhood on has a very keen interest in science. And so he's sought out scientists, and especially this developed momentum in 1987 after consultation with this wonderful man, the late Francisco Varela, a very dear friend of mine, a world-class neuroscientist, and a philosopher, and a practicing Buddhist. Then with Francisco Varela, then they created the Mind and Life Institute that's been running since 1987. And since that time, on an annual or biannual basis, His Holiness has met world-class scientists, neuroscientists, physicists, biologists, and so on, psychologists, psychiatrists from all over the world. And so he's highlighted this element of Buddhism, I think, more than perhaps any other Lama. Many are great philosophers, the Geshes, the Khenpos, the Sakya Khenpos, the Gelugpa Geshe, outstanding in philosophy, there's no question. Otherwise, you don't get to become a Geshe. But I know of no one who has emphasized the scientific aspect and also emphasized the aspects that really can be presented in a secular fashion. And now we come back to Genla's point of the Nalanda tradition and His Holiness's wish to repay the kindness of Mother India, without which Tibetan culture could have vanished. It could have vanished. If those refugees had no place to go, it could have vanished. So how can you ever repay a debt like that? Well, His Holiness is commonly, in the ancient times, India was our guru, and we Tibetans were the chela. But now that great Nalanda tradition that was wiped out more than almost 1,000 years ago, 13th century, almost all those monasteries, all those universities were destroyed by, frankly, from barbarians from the West. As they were destroyed in India, and if I may be blunt, the Cultural Revolution, this was barbaric. I never say Chinese people are barbaric, but the destruction of temples, of monasteries, of the medical school, and so forth, whoever does it, whether it's Americans or Chinese or Turks, it's barbaric. But it's Tibet alone that has preserved this heritage. And so His Holiness, never proselytizing Buddhism as a religion, says, we have a debt to repay. And I've been working with academics from India who are very eager to restore the integrity and depth of their own ancient university tradition, not to push Hinduism or the Brahmanic tradition or Buddhism, but to draw from the vast knowledge of the Nalanda tradition, much of which is available only in the Tibetan language, in the Kangyur and the Tengyur. And so this is the point. So scientifically, I think there's no prominent Lama, I think it's quite clear, no prominent Lama that is highlighted more clearly and with such dedication, decade after decade, to draw out the truly scientific aspects of the Nalanda tradition, above all, when it comes to the study of the mind and the nature of the true sources of suffering and the nature of true sources of genuine well-being. So this is, I think we're all tremendously fortunate, because His Holiness might have had other type of predilections, just as in terms of personality, but always had a very, very keen interest. And I've witnessed him many, many times in dialogue with scientists, very few of whom have been Buddhist. And the open-mindedness, always the open-mindedness to learn new things, to listen carefully, sometimes to debate, sometimes to show contributions from the Buddhist side. And unlike almost any other Buddhist teacher, saying, if you scientists show us any empirical evidence that is clearly confirmed, corroborated, that refutes any of our Buddhist beliefs, he said, Tenzin Gyatso, I will set aside a Buddhist belief that's clearly refuted by compelling evidence. That's unique to His Holiness. I've asked even scientists, one in particular, if Buddhism, Buddhist contemplatives, Buddhist yogis, if they make a discovery about the nature of mind that contradicts the beliefs of science, beliefs of materialism in particular, that the mind is just a function of the brain, would you accept the insights by Buddhist contemplatives? And the scientist said, no. So I have found greater open-mindedness from His Holiness than from most of the scientists I've encountered in dialogue. Now that's just my perspective, but I stand by it. You want to debate me? I will debate you.
Yeah.
So we are now in the last 30 minutes of this amazing session. So I will address Wangchen La. The last question is, what has had the impact of the Dalai Lama in Tibet, but not only in Tibet, in the world?
Yeah, this very simple question, but we need hours to explain. Yes, but that is okay. That's impact of Dalai Lama to the Tibetans in Tibet is really, we cannot express in a word. Yes, historically, first Dalai Lama since 14th century. Yes, so first Dalai Lama was born there, and then after that, gradual till 14th Dalai Lama, yes, came to the land of snow, roof of the world, Tibet. Yes, because it's in the beginning you explained that something like we believe that Dalai Lamas are the manifestation, emanation of a Buddha of compassion. Yes, Chandrasi, Avalokiteshvara. For this reason, Dalai Lama comes again and again. He born, give birth, and he work, and then he live. And so then again he comes. So like 14 times he did that. So now the 14th, even Tenzin Gyatso, 14th the Dalai Lama of Tibet, is one of the most famous in this world. Yes, one of the most famous and beloved by millions of people in this world. Why? Not because he is handsome, not because he's very smart and he's very rich. Not that, because people love Dalai Lama, whether different religions respect him. Yes, people who don't believe God, Allah, anything, also they respect Dalai Lama, except Chinese government. Besides Chinese government, everybody like Dalai Lama, love Dalai Lama, because his value, yes, his qualities of a simple, humble, good heart, and he really treat the president of the country same as the people in the street. And, you know, poor people, he also treat the same. He always respect, yes, to all, high or low, rich or poor. He have no differences. He always treats people. He believe because he is my brother, he's my sister, he's my teacher. Like this kind of thinking, he behaved the same. Therefore, whole world really like Dalai Lama. And wherever Dalai Lama goes, you know, lately, all stadiums, football stadium, Olympic stadium will be full. Because, you know, in even many places, in one day, all the tickets were sold. There's like, you know, even Beatles sometimes difficult, you know. Yeah. So this is what the Dalai Lama, his really charisma, his message of non-violence and the peace for the world, this touches to the heart of all the people, politicians, no politicians, businessmen, whatever. So this is what, and for the Tibetans, of course, without His Holiness, as before Lama Alan mentioned, same, you know, we don't know whether our culture, Tibetan culture, Buddhist Tibetan Buddhism is alive or not. If the Indian government didn't give us a chance, you know, if they didn't invite us officially, so where we go, where we can establish schools, where we can build monasteries, where His Holiness Dalai Lama can travel easily like now. So this is all gratitude from the Indian government and Indian people, and our culture, identity, our language, our philosophy, everything is alive outside the Tibet, yeah, more than inside Tibet. Inside Tibet, there are many controls still these days. Politically, Chinese government is controlling, you know, that schools are closing, Tibetan schools are closed, and then children has to, obligation, you know, obliged to send with the Chinese students, live years together to forget our language and only speak Chinese. And monastery were controlled, you know. Okay, this is something very, so His Holiness is the only hope for 6 million Tibetans. Yes, and even under the pressure of Chinese government in Tibet, the people are, you know, just last week in China on one bridge, China,
Oh, yeah.
that Tibetans have written Chinese and they hang on the bridge. So
Oh my God.
yes, that we want, you know, this is zero COVID image. And then there were all the Tibetans in Tibet, Lhasa especially, so suffering, so much, yes, control. And so the Tibetans are saying that, please, now Xi Jinping is, if he will continue 5 years more, he have to change a little bit. Otherwise, he will, you know, he will receive the bills after. If he do this, he himself karma, his own karma will come upon him after a few years, of course. So therefore, we say, and then His Holiness, really, because of him, our Tibetans all are united. We are doing our best to, you know, to promote more peace, more harmony, and you know, to work in different countries. You know, this is one thing. So especially Dalai Lama gives a big hope to Tibetans who are inside Tibet. So this is most important. Even they cannot see him, they are not allowed to have a picture, photo in their home. It's prohibited. It's illegal to have a Dalai Lama portrait or photo in their home. So then, besides, Chinese government says religious freedom in Tibet. What that means, you know, if they cannot have a Dalai Lama photo in their home or in monastery, and then where is the religious freedom? Anyway, we know that what the Chinese government doing, they not only to Tibetan Uyghurs, in Muslims, what they are suffering, they are in Hong Kong now, what is doing also that, and Taiwan, even they want Taiwan now, they want China, So these are the politically what Chinese government, Chinese government is impermanence, and everything is permanent. There's now in this world, there's no much dictatorship is left, just few of them. It won't last forever, and China will change, of course. We Tibetans cannot change China. We have no power. But Chinese people will change China. Chinese government, communist, yes? So therefore, impermanence gives us a teaching. And then His Holiness, hopefully, okay, he is 78 now. From all the Dalai Lama, 14 Dalai Lama.
87.
87, yes. What I said?
78.
I said
78.
70. No, okay. That would be good omen, 78. So it is 87, yes.
Yeah.
87, there's two numbers, 7 and 8, 87. So 87 is a good sign. And then now, even though he believed that his number is quite high, but his spirit is more smart than us, so he is very well. Last week I saw him. I met him, His Holiness, in Dharamsala. So he's so fine, yes. And his mind is so sharp. He non-stop, he's receiving people, he's giving teaching, he's receiving Chinese people, he's receiving Vietnam people, Korean people, Japanese people, So thousands of people follow Dalai Lama. Even in China, they say, yes, so under the control of Chinese government, Chinese people are following His Holiness. Yeah, that is what. So we believe that Dalai Lama, he will still, he will live 113, 110, he promised, yes. Some prediction 113, but many times His Holiness says, I don't know 113, but 110, sure I will stay, I will live. So this is good, So we are lucky. So maybe we will go before him. I always pray also, may I go before him. Then at least he will pray for us, If he leave before us, and what we can do for him, yes, then Chinese government will really come into the politics, and then there will be big disaster among Tibetan people, I believe, So this is what Chinese government want. As when His Holiness dies, then they want to use, even they mentioned that they will take care of looking for reincarnation of 15th Dalai Lama. So that is great. I want to say thank you for American government, also in Parliament, the Senate. They have taken the resolution saying that only Dalai Lama Ganden Potang has a responsibility and right to choose the 15th Dalai Lama. None of the country in the world can make involvement. So this is kind of American government is doing so well. Also, I can say Indian government is number one for us, and number two, I can say also American government. There are so many Tibetans live in America, and then American government is also supporting economically for the Tibetan government in exile. So, and education and health, so many things. So I really want to say thank you, all the American governments. Yes. So okay. Anyway, my English is not that perfect. I'm always here speaking in Spanish, my Spanish style, but now I'm trying my best to explain in English. Hopefully, American friends and other English-speaking people understood my simple English. Sure. Okay, so now.
Wanchala, thank you very much. I don't know if I cannot see the Lama Alan is still here on the screen.
I'm here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm here.
Hello. No,
Hello.
I want also to know a bit your opinion or your vision about the impact that the Dalai Lama has on Tibet, but of course in the world, you know.
There are many people who have charisma. Some of them are musicians, some are politicians, some are scientists. Charisma is something ethically neutral. Some of the great despots, the great tyrants of the world, have been very charismatic. But when it comes to His Holiness, I wouldn't use the word charisma, although he clearly has charisma. But I think what is really distinctive, not unique, but distinctive about him and the impressions he leaves on many, many people, as he is called Kundun in Tibetan, which could be translated loosely as presence or spiritual presence, divine, holy presence. Clearly that is the case. I think it is the sheer and very profound and pure goodness that His Holiness embodies, that permeates his mind and permeates his speech, I believe, as far as I know, at all times. I'll give just one example of this. It was at a meeting with scientists 22 years ago, and I was, on that occasion, one of the two interpreters, Gen Yeshila Thubten being the primary interpreter, but I was there also. And there was a world-class scientist. They were all world-class, but one of them, very eminent psychologist, who was secular, had nothing connection with any religion at all. Ethical man, but absolutely not religious. And he had the opportunity during one of the breaks, outside of the formal conversation with the scientist and His Holiness, to simply come next to His Holiness during a tea break and sit with him. And this man has made it very public that he had struggled with anger a lot for his whole life, his whole adult life. Not a bad man, not a hateful man, but a lot of anger coming up. He had a very difficult childhood. And he sat there with His Holiness just for maybe 15 minutes, and I was right next to him, serving as interpreter in this very unofficial conversation. And during the conversation, His Holiness took this man's hands in his own, like this, his hands, and His Holiness embraced his hand with His Holiness' hands. And they spoke back and forth. I was interpreting. I think probably His Holiness spoke in English on occasion. I don't remember what they said, but I do remember His Holiness was holding his hand for the whole time. The scientist then spoke to me afterwards, and this had been very public. I don't invade people's personal or private matters. And he said he experienced something utterly unprecedented in his whole life. He was a very senior scientist at that time, on the verge of retiring. But he said, this 15 minutes of His Holiness holding my hand, he said, I've never in my entire life experienced what I did as he held my hand. And I asked, well, what did you experience? And he said, I find it hard to find words. The only word that comes to mind is pure goodness. That I was infused with pure goodness as he held my hand. And it changed his life. He commented after that 15-minute infusion that for, I think, weeks or months, he never got angry. And even in that, after that, anger levels went way, way down. He was transformed, not so much by His Holiness's words, not by the dialogue with the other scientists. It was very, very meaningful, wonderful dialogue. But it was His Holiness's presence, a pure virtue that deeply impacted this mind, gave him a memory he will never lose, unprecedented in his whole long life. And of course, it's not just for this one man. And I witnessed His Holiness engage with scientists over these last, now, more than 30 years. They may or may not be impressed by the Buddhist insights and the dialectics, the logic, Buddhist experience, and so forth. But I think possibly without exception, the scientists, most of whom are very secular, not religious at all, are deeply moved by his presence, by his goodness, his virtue, his warmth, his kindness. The very embodiment, personification of the Buddha of compassion. And whether it's 10,000 people in an auditorium or it's a one-on-one conversation, I think people around the world, religious of all kinds and not religious, they're moved by him. Often his words are very simple words that other people say also. Often. Anybody can say those words. They're lovely words, virtuous words. Anybody can say them. But not many people would draw 10,000 people into an auditorium to listen to him, see these simple words of peace, of kindness, of compassion. That's his impact. It's sheer goodness, sheer virtue. But together with that, something quite distinct of His Holiness. And that is, from early on, I've seen videos of him when he was very, very young. And spontaneously, over decades now, some conversation will take place, and then suddenly he's bursting out with a laughter. This good cheer, this laughter, that is just so pure and so genuine. And he brings that wherever he goes. He laughs so easily, but it's very sweet laughter, very pure laughter. And then he brings gladness to the hearts of others with his laughter. So the impact there, it's goodness, it's truth, it's virtue and humility. Again, Wangchen commented that the only people who don't love him are the Chinese Communist Politburo. I think there's a very simple reason for that. They not only don't understand him, they have a complete, absolute misunderstanding of who he is, what he stands for, and what his aspirations are. It's complete, driven by propaganda that with a loud voice shouts out the truth. So the Chinese people hardly ever hear the truth because they're shouting out that he's a wolf in sheep's clothing, that he's trying to separate Tibet. He's an enemy of the Chinese empire. But of course, anybody who listens to His Holiness with an open mind knows that's the exact opposite of the truth. For decades now, he's been promoting the middle way, never challenging or assaulting or endangering the People's Republic of China, the PRC. Never. What the Politburo, the Chinese leadership, right up to Xi Jinping, don't understand is among all the Tibetans living, he's their greatest friend. There are Tibetans who would really be inclined to violence if they could get away, if it could be successful. There were Tibetan guerrillas, freedom fighters, until His Holiness told them to stop. Tibetans, like any other people, in some ways, they would want to fight for their country, like, as we know, people nowadays, fighting for their country when it's invaded. When you have no choice, then you fight, right? But His Holiness has never, ever advocated violence, even in response to the most inconceivable atrocities, violations of human rights, desecration of a whole culture, pillaging of monasteries, and torture, and torture, and torture. So no, the Chinese Communist government doesn't love the Dalai Lama, but they don't have a clue who he is, and they don't recognize how fortunate they are. Because His Holiness, the leader of Tibetan people, didn't need to be a monk. He didn't need to be a Nobel Peace Prize winner. He could have been violent. He could have been violent, and I've lived with Tibetans. I know the Khampas, they are tough, tough people, really tough. The Amdo is also. And gosh, the Viet Cong kicked out America. How much more powerful was America than North Vietnam? But they kicked us out with their courage, their commitment, their wish to run their own country their way. Tibetans could have gone that way. They could have gone that way. But there's been never any Tibetan alive who's more consistently advocated only peace and nonviolence than His Holiness. The Chinese should bless should count their blessings that His Holiness is still alive, while they, in the complete delusion, are waiting for him to die. So that in one of the most flagrant acts of hypocrisy, this atheistic government that doesn't believe anything about reincarnation said, we'll find the real reincarnation. Nobody believes that. And so His Holiness stands for truth and for virtue, for wisdom and compassion. And as we all know, anybody who's not brainwashed by Chinese Communist propaganda, the Chinese government rules by fear. And their whole conquest of Tibet is based on lies, misinformation. All of the information they give about Tibet, about the Dalai Lama, is misinformation. And so, oddly enough, here's a government of China who I think they're not afraid of America at all. I don't think so. They have more people, they have atomic weapons. I don't think they're afraid of President Biden at all. But you know who they're afraid of? The Dalai Lama. 87-year-old peace advocate for his whole life, and they're afraid of him because he stands for truth and virtue, and their government is based on misinformation and cruelty. Be afraid, because the truth will prevail. It may not look like it, but truth over lies, which has the greater longevity. And His Holiness is the truth speaker. He always has been. And the Chinese government, from the time that it turned communist, has been promoting lies worldwide and preventing their own people from learning the truth by controlling the media. How much media do you think His Holiness Dalai Lama controls? So I think they have a reason to be afraid of him. Not for the reasons they believe, but truth prevails. Virtue is stronger than hatred. And His Holiness will win. And I pray, and I'm convinced, His Holiness will go back to Tibet during his lifetime, and the internal freedom of the Tibetan people will be restored. If that's under the rubric or the context of Chinese government, fine, protect them. But I believe this, and it is my prayer, and I pray for the long life of His Holiness, that he will go back in his lifetime.
It's an amazing aspiration, Lama Alan. Most of us also join to this aspiration with you. So while you are speaking, Lama Alan, it came something to my mind is to ask Wangchen La to promote more meetings with the more powerful people in the world, like Jipin or like another. And the Dalai Lama took the hands for 15 minutes and see what happens, you know?
Yeah.
Possible it could be a change in the world, you know, and more peaceful. And so we are finalizing now. I only want to ask you both if you can give us a little gift about some memory that you have from the Dalai Lama from long time ago that was very important or very meaningful for you, and can help us to increase and to promote our devotion to him and to the Dharma also.
And Wangchen, maybe you can begin.
Wangchen.
Okay. First of all, thank you, Lama Alan. All your words you have inspired. And now Alfonso asking that, of course, I was just born as just a farmer child in one of the village in Tibet. And then, okay, if Chinese didn't come to Tibet, invade Tibet, I will be, in a small village, whole life working in the field, and even, no chance to see and talk with Dalai Lama, in my life. I can say that. Then after that, now Chinese took over Tibet, and even my mother died. And then I was, urged to begging in the street in Kathmandu and Amritsar in India, then school. And then, I got a chance to admit as a monk and in Dharamsala, Namgyal, yes, where we met Alan together. So that was my karma, very lucky karma, that I have to say thanks to the Chinese for this. When I'm a little bit uncomfortable with the Chinese, what they are doing now, then uncomfortable and angry a little bit, then it won't help. And neither me, neither China. So then best thing is, oh, thank you. You did a lot damage in Tibet. So that's what a pity. And then on the other side, you have given me a big chance to meet with His Holiness and studying with him, doing puja with him, and to learn all the, good things from His Holiness personally, years and years, 11 years with him. So this I cannot remember. There's no value, more than that. So I always say that His Holiness, I remember how he give us advices, when we were young, when we were in the beginning in the monastery, he gave us tremendous advices, very, very practical future advices, So these are the things we cannot forget his advices and his wisdom and his compassion to all of us, not only to the monks, not only to the Tibetans. He always speak us, he always tell us not to hatred to China. And, so you have to love to China because they are our brothers. They are also human. These kind of things are very profound, So His Holiness, also I have something, okay, I can say that once I was in a monastery, we go to TCV school for pujas, So on the road is very rough, and I run, and I fell down, and then rocky road. Then on the way there's water, how you call pond, water, yes, and Gorkha water. There's something, so I wash my blood face. I fell down, and then there is a Naga, So next day, Naga harmed me, and next day we have a big puja with His Holiness, his palace. Then drums, trumpet, something. So my wounds are vibrating, bum, 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 swelling. Then, and second day, I cannot bear more. Then I asked permission to Gergela, the disciplinary, that I'm really unable to continue the puja. May I leave the puja? And he says, yes. So I went to rest on my bed. Then His Holiness noticed. He says, where is Wangchen? And then somebody asked, Wangchen is not feeling well, and then they continues. His Holiness and sent Choyok, the ritual master, okay, go to Wangchen and ask what he have done these days. And then Choyok come and say, His Holiness says, what you have done these days? I was a little bit, no, please tell him that I didn't do anything. And I was in puja, and I don't know. Then he said, then His Holiness meditate, and then he says, oh, I think Wangchen was harmed by Nagas. So please, Abbot and Lobenla from monastery, so they are doing big puja. And then even His Holiness said, okay, you two go to do a Naga puja, because Wangchen have a very short life. If you don't do a Naga puja, he will have 2-3 days only. So His Holiness have seen that. And this Kempo, Namgyal Tasan Kempo, and Lobenla, these two did a puja of Naga, next morning, I went to that place and I have say apologize to the Naga, and I offer some rituals, and then they accept, and immediately my whole faces are swollen. I cannot open my eyes. I have to like this open. So then, so His Holiness saved my life. You know, this is my own experience. He saw something and the Naga, and then he just, so I really feel gratitude. So now I have a responsibility to serve His Holiness because he saved my life. You know, I have to, not for me. I don't have to work for me because that's, I will get enough food and drinks and place to sleep. This is not, but you know, for my country to fulfill His Holiness wish. And this I always think, and I am trying my best to, you know, do for to serve His Holiness. Therefore, I'm here in Barcelona doing my things as much as I can. Yes. So this is okay.
So precious history and so touchy, Wangchen La. Thank you for sharing with us. So Lama Alan, we need some little history from you also, please.
My story cannot possibly match the story of Kusho Wangchen La. That was an amazing story, amazing story. So mine is very anticlimactic, just a little footnote to his wonderful story there. But Alfonso, you mentioned at the beginning that His Holiness is one of my primary teachers, actually more than that. Since I first met him in the fall of 1971, about 51 years ago, he has been my root Lama, my primary guide, my primary refuge. And I really do regard all my other Lamas. I've trained to receive empowerment teachings from about 40 Lamas, from all the traditions of Tibetan Buddhism, also Theravada. But I think very practically from my side, all of the other ones seem like emanations of him. Emanating as a great Theravada master from Sri Lanka, emanating as my teachers from all the 4 schools of Tibetan Buddhism. And he's the one. I have spoken to him personally and said, please, in all my lifetimes, please catch me with the hook of your compassion. So in any future lifetimes, whether it's 3 countless eons or it's three lifetimes, that I'm never separated from you. So he is my root Lama. That's the meaning of root Lama. But when I first heard of the Dalai Lama, when I was, probably in Europe, I don't know. I thought, but he's the God King. He's the leader of a country. And I simply wanted to find a Lama who was a yogi, you know, who would guide me in meditation. All I wanted to do really was meditate. But I made my way to Dharamsala when I was 21, specifically because a bulletin arrived at the Tibetan monastery where I was studying in Switzerland, saying that His Holiness had created this library of Tibetan works and archives under his auspices, and that under his auspices, 1-year classes would be held for Westerners who would like to come and really intensively study Buddhism. And so the Sakya Lama, under whom I was training in Switzerland, said, you definitely go there. This is priceless to be able to study under the auspices of His Holiness. So I went, and I was just by great good fortune. I am a very, very fortunate person. I was invited as soon as I arrived in Dharamsala to stay in the home of Dr. Yeshe Dunten. So I lived with him for close to 2 years. And of course, he's a personal physician, so I had a direct, frequent contact with His Holiness. And shortly after I arrived in the fall of 1971, Yeshe Dunten told me, Alan, if you want to have a meeting, a personal audience with His Holiness, you can do so. But I was very shy, and I knew he's a great man. That I knew. I didn't want to waste his time just to have a chat with him. That would be, I think, disrespectful. And so, but I held it in my mind until I had a real question in my mind I didn't know how to solve. I've told this story many times, so pardon me for all those who've heard it before. But after studying quite intensively for just a couple of months, I'm still a baby in Dharma, I saw that I knew I wanted to devote the rest of my life to Dharma, and that means cultivating virtue. Dharma is cultivating virtue. wisdom, compassion, being a better person. I knew that's all I wanted to do with the rest of my life. But I saw even in 2 months, I had a bit more understanding, understanding than other Westerners who just arrived from Dharamsala. And some pride was coming up. Oh, I know more than you do. I can speak Tibetan. You can't speak Tibetan. I'm a bit better. And I thought, oh, no. There's going to be a catastrophe. Because I want to devote the rest of my life to cultivating virtue. But how can I do that? Cultivate knowledge and understanding and wisdom and other virtues. How can I do that and not feel I'm superior to other people who are not devoting themselves to these aspirations? And I really saw no way out. How can you become a better person and not feel I'm better than other people? I didn't see. So Saki, now I have a question. I can't solve this question. So then I asked, may I please have a personal audience with His Holiness? And it was immediately granted. And so then, very shortly after, then I have this one-on-one meeting with His Holiness, my very first one. And I posed this question. Now, Gyaltsen Wangchen had mentioned that His Holiness is like a flower that attracts many bees. Well, His Holiness gave a different analogy that I thought was absolutely correct. And that is, I being born in California, raised in America, but also in Europe, a little bit even in Israel. So I had a very rich background, loving parents, a very good family, very happy childhood in many ways. But by the time I was 20, doing well in university, I found that I wasn't at home. The type of Christianity to which I had been exposed didn't make any sense to me. It just didn't make any sense to me. Science is very brilliant, but there was very little meaning for life, no virtue. Western philosophy, very brilliant, but it didn't really touch my heart. So I had no home in my homeland. I had no home in Western civilization. And in a way, I was a voluntary refugee. Nothing like Tibetan refugees. They weren't voluntary. Tremendous persecution. I wasn't like that at all. But I was homeless. I was homeless because I wasn't at home in Europe or America. There's nothing I wanted. And that's why I bought a one-way ticket to India to learn from the Tibetans. And so I walked into His Holiness and I told him, how do I avoid developing greater pride? Nagyel, I win, I'm better than you. How can I do that when I actually do want to cultivate virtue? And if I succeed, then I'll have greater virtue. And then His Holiness gave another analogy, different from the one from Gyaltsen Wangchen. He said, well, imagine a beggar with no home, no food, coming to a very nice house. Maybe smells the food, maybe they're presenting a wonderful banquet. And the poor beggar wearing rags and empty bowl comes to and knocks on the door. Please, master of the house, can you give me a few scraps? Maybe some leftovers from yesterday. Some dry bread, anything would be nice. His Holiness said, well, imagine this beggar comes to the house. And instead of just giving that person some scraps and saying, well, okay, now on you go. Be happy, that was some nice scraps we gave you. Instead, the beggar is invited into the house. And they're just sitting down to the meal, having a banquet. And the beggar is treated like a member of the family. With all the children, all the family. The beggar is not part of the family. And the beggar is invited, have as much as you like of this wonderful food, so many different kinds of food. And eat as much as you like, have seconds, have thirds, have as much as you like. So imagine that, His Holiness told me. And then he asked me, at the end of the meal, when the beggar was just full of this delicious, nourishing food, having eaten the meal, would the beggar feel proud that he'd eaten so much food, gotten so much nourishment? I said, no, of course not. You're the beggar. And I came to Dharamsala with hardly any money. I didn't even have enough money for a return ticket to America. I came as a beggar. And His Holiness, that's just a short list. Other teachers also, lamas that I trained with, Gyanlam Rinpa, Gen Shamba Wondu, the list goes on and on. They invited me to a banquet. How can anybody be proud being the recipient of such gratitude, such generosity? Because that's what it was. Selfless, completely selfless. The Dharma really offered for free. So that was memorable. And that worked. I don't think my pride has increased over the last 52 years. I'm not free of pride. But I don't think it's increased. Maybe just still there, like an old virus that hasn't gone away yet. And then His Holiness concluded the conversation. And this is a nice note maybe for us to end on. I think there was actually a fly in the room, quite a few flies in India. And he pointed at the fly and said, now, if this fly were to act very selfishly, like there's a little drop of honey, and this fly comes over to it, and then another fly comes. The first fly might be very defensive. Go away, my honey, be very selfish. Well, we understand the fly is a fly, doesn't have much choice, right? Not much choice. But he said, if I, Tenzin Gyatso, if I should behave like that, well, that would be shameful. Because I have much greater intelligence, much greater understanding, much greater knowledge. So the more knowledge and understanding one has, the greater responsibility one has. More is expected from those who are human beings, who understand Dharma, have insight, have virtue. More is expected. So he said, the more you receive, the more you have a responsibility to give back. Again, pride doesn't factor in. It means nothing. If you receive a great deal, then you have a moral obligation to give back more. And so those were his two pith instructions. And I knew from that one conversation, this is my root Lama. From now until enlightenment. And that's my story.
Oh, Namalan and Wangchen Lao, thank you very much. I mean, of course, we have run out of time for a topic like this, but you still haven't reached our knowledge and presented a subject from a perspective that only a few people could offer, like you. So I really appreciate that. So we really appreciate very, very, very much. Thank you for all your time, your devotion, to all of us, because you have gave us an enormous gift that we can keep in our hearts for until the next dialogue that we are trying to do and to promote. So thank you very much. If you have something to say to the audience before we left, no, that's all has done or have been said. Okay, so thank you very much. So the only that I want is to thank you all the assistants, because without your presence, this event will be meaningless. So we want also to thank our fellows who are helping us to do this event. Mireia Pretus for translating, Diego Gonzalez for hosting this live online event, Jude James and David Johnson for all the office and social media work, Michelle Victoria to help us in the online communication, and also our friends, our kind friends, Fina Iñiguez and Marta Anguita from the House of Tibet of Spain. So, well, only that I have to say is we are summoned for the next edition of CCN Dialogues. So we hope to see you all again. Thank you very much, and we keep you in our hearts. Thank you, Wangchen La, and long life for the Dalai Lama and all of you also. Really.
Thank you, Alfonso, and all of you who made this happen. Thank you.
Okay.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias. Goodbye, everybody.